Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I'm Dave Smith. He is Robbie The Fire Bernstein. We are both not at home. I'm on a family vacation actually right now, which is something people with families do around this time of year. And Rob, you're off gigging, which is something Rob does this time of year.
It looks like we're in the same shitty hotel rental.
I'm actually in quite a beautiful house, but I found a pretty plain corner of it to be podcasting from. By the way, I'm literally well, I'm right outside there's a bunch of kids in a pool out back. So if you hear any noise, that's what's happening. It does. Kids having the time of their life in a pool sounds very similar to kids being tortured to death. It's a very weird thing that I just hear like insanity coming from out there. And I'm like, are they alive? And then they're like, oh, they're having more fun than any humans ever had. But anyway, where are you up? You're in the middle of the summer porch tour, I gather.
It was an epic weekend of porch touring. I'm currently in Pittsburgh, and then we head down to Richmond, Virginia Beach, Raleigh, North Carolina, and then off to Texas. So we're porch touring.
Hell yeah, dude. Sounds fun. And then, of course, me and you are going to be all over the country for the rest of the year. ComicDaveSmith.com for all the tickets to come see me and Rob when we come by you. All right, so I've been on vacation for a few days, and I'm not keeping up with the news as much as I do when I'm at home. But I have been. It's been impossible to not spend a little bit of time on it because it's just been, I don't even know exactly how to say this. It's a weird place that me and you find ourselves in. It's a weird time to be doing a show about what's going on in the world while so many crazy things have been happening over the last few years. Me and you were doing this podcast for years. I started this podcast during the Obama administration, and I was recording through Donald Trump getting elected. Me and you were recording together through Donald Trump being framed for treason. And, there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened in 2016 and 17 and 2018 and 19. Then obviously 2020, it was crazy to be doing a show about the news while the country was shut down. And, so a million other crazy things happened in those years, pretty fairly unstable and eventful time to be talking about what's going on in the world. I will say the last, what has it been, 5 days? How long has it been since the debate? This little stretch, that debate and this little stretch since is up there with just the wildest moments in politics that I've ever seen. There's so many different angles to it. It's like, I've made the comparison a million times, and I'm sure you have too. Lots of people have too, but to the Emperor's New Clothes, which, as I've said before, I remember this story when I was a kid. I remember us being taught as kids, like this story, The Emperor's New Clothes, and it's all about a naked emperor, and everyone's pretending he has beautiful new clothes on, and then one little boy calls it out, and I never really thought like, oh, what a brilliant story. It was just kind of like a fun little story that, kids enjoyed. But over the last few years, you're like, oh, I got to go reassess how brilliant the author of that story was, because it really is talking about something, profound. And, the Joe Biden's mental state, for anybody who has not either been not paying attention at all or has such partisan tunnel vision that they were somehow capable of pretending, like some cognitive dissonance type thing, that you could just like pretend that what's right in front of your face isn't right in front of your face because you really want to believe, in Joe Biden's amazing competence or something like that. But for anybody else who was outside of that, this has been an obvious thing since at least 2019 that it's like, oh yeah, clearly Joe Biden is had some severe cognitive decline. And it was almost like we were all waiting till when this would, at a crucial moment reveal itself. And of course this happened. We did a whole post-debate, stream, so you can go watch that if you want to see some more of our thoughts on that. But now there's this very strange dynamic where everybody had to admit it. But after months of pretending it wasn't a thing, years really of pretending it wasn't a thing. And now there is a very strange divide on the Democratic side of the aisle over what the hell to do about this. So evidently, at least it's been reported, I saw NBC News reported that Joe Biden went back to Camp David, where he had been for a couple of weeks preparing for the debate. Great job, by the way, preparing for that debate. Time well spent at Camp David. And he was having a discussion with family and close allies about what to do going forward.
In my experience with dementia, you keep going until your balls are out. And that's when it's over. It's the moment when you show your grandkids and your offspring your balls that everyone goes, all right, I just saw his nuts. And then
think we're going to need a new candidate.
Dementia. Yeah, so for
there you
now,
go.
He's still okay until the balls are out on live television.
Well, that seems to be according to NBC News, he was leaning most heavily on the advice of Hunter. I'm not making that up. And I know you said that somewhat in jest, Rob, but I could see that being Hunter's real advice. Like, I'm be like, I don't know. They got you with your balls out, banging an underage chick, then you're fine, dude. Keep going.
Hunter's like, listen, I got the crack dose wrong on that debate, but I got you through the last 7 things, so just give me one more chance, Dad. I got the supplies you need, and I ran the experiments on myself. I know what to do here.
Trust me. If there's anybody who's going to know what dose to give you, it's probably Hunter. Well, look, I mean, I think essentially this is where I was going to say there's a divide, but there's probably like a few different camps here. Right. And it's important to understand kind of all of them. So there are, let's say there's one camp is people connected to the Biden administration. OK, so this is anybody who's in his cabinet, anybody who's in business with somebody who's in his cabinet, anybody who maybe you could be someone who works for the corporate media. But let's say you have Blinken's chief of staff is a good friend of yours. And so you can get inside information from him, right? So like anyone kind of connected to the actual Joe Biden administration. So this group of people is all heavily incentivized for Joe Biden to stay in because they lose their job if Joe Biden gets out, or they lose their connection if Joe Biden gets out. This includes Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, like family members, everything like that. If Jill Biden goes from being the first lady who's kind of secretly believed to be, let's just say punching above a first lady's weight class, right? Like now she loses that. If Joe Biden announces he's not running again, then for the next 4 years, she's just some lady. That's it. There's, Hunter Biden, he loses having a president who can pardon him, who's his dad. Like there's people like that and people who have these positions. These people are all heavily incentivized to keep Joe Biden in the race. Then there are business interests who, depending on the sector, could be incentivized to have a Democrat as the president. So like, for example, if you're, whether it's a big bank or big pharma or, say you're like a green energy company or something like that, you're going to do way better with a Democrat in. But now your incentive is for the Democrats' best chance to win. You don't really care if it's Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris. It doesn't matter to you. All that matters is who can win this election. Those are the people who are incentivized to push Joe Biden to drop out. Okay, because they just want the best shot a Democrat has, and they realize this guy is not possibly it after that debate performance. This is but like, I'll say right now, I don't think there's any coming back from that debate performance. It's not, as we mentioned in the live stream. Actually, let me save that thought for a second. I'll just say there's a third group of people that would consist of people in the corporate media, political commentators, things like this, who have gone all in on this is a right-wing conspiracy theory that Joe Biden is senile. Oh, then you could even include like online influencers in this group also, who have been saying all along, oh, Sleepy Joe is just a dumb nickname that Donald Trump made up for him. And, blah, blah. So now they have to figure out what they're doing. And you see a lot of this in the corporate media where a lot of them have gone, well, shit, we can't pretend anymore. So now we're going to make it like it's a shocking thing. That's kind of their narrative. Oh my God, this is so shocking that he had such a bad night. That's what they keep saying, a bad night, like as if that's what happened, which is obviously not at all the case. The truth is that this was, and we said this on the live stream the other day, but there's just kind of no getting around this. It was not a bad night. It was not. Barack Obama got on Twitter and tried to spin it. He said, bad debate performances happen. I should know, kind of alluding to his first debate in 2012 with Mitt Romney. It was pretty.
Bad things happen.
Right. Well, it was kind of universally, maybe not universally, but it was largely agreed that Obama's first debate with Mitt Romney, he didn't do a great job. And that was true. He didn't have a great debate performance. But to even compare the two of them, like they're in the same universe, this wasn't a bad debate performance. Again, I've been thinking about this. I put out a tweet like, what do you think? What's the second worst debate performance ever? Because like obviously this is the worst. And people brought up a few. There's good examples. I mean, and I think we might have mentioned a few of them on the live stream. But Richard Nixon, famously in 1960, in the first televised debate, people who listened to it on radio thought Nixon won, but people who watched it on TV thought Jack Kennedy won. Nixon had like sweat above his lip and just didn't look good on camera. It was a little bit stiff.
Said that makeup's for fruitcakes.
Yeah. Well, he had a point. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, our wonderful sponsor, Monetary Metals. Unlock a 12% return on silver. Are you ready to start building wealth by putting your precious metals to work? Silver isn't just a precious metal. It's a tangible asset and a great way to diversify any investment portfolio. And with Monetary Metals, you don't just own physical silver. You own silver that works for you to generate more silver, growing your total ounces over time. Right now, you can earn 12% annual interest on silver, paid in silver, in their latest offering if you're an accredited investor. Click the link in the episode description or head over to monetary-metals.com. Monetary Metals is revolutionizing the way you invest in gold and silvers. They've been paying interest in silver and gold for over 8 years, helping you grow your wealth in real tangible assets. Finally, there's a true alternative to saving in dollars, a yield on gold and silver with Monetary Metals. This is the first true silver bond since 1834. Earn 12% annual interest on silver, paid in silver. You must be an accredited investor to participate. It's a 3-year term. The bond is financing a publicly traded mining company located in the Western United States. Click the link in the episode description or head to monetary-metals.com for more information on how to participate. All right, let's get back into the show. The worst ones outside of this debate that I could think of are probably both primary debates. But if you remember, Rob, just a few years ago, Michael Bloomberg had a really bad debate day. It's Elizabeth Warren was grilling him, and his, he was asking why all these women had to sign NDAs who worked for him. And he was like, oh, maybe I told an off-color joke, and that drew boos from the crowd. It did not go good for him, and it went bad enough that it kind of crushed his hopes at being the nominee. And of course, famously, Jeb Bush, just got beat up by Donald Trump. But I can't even explain. Biden's was so much worse than theirs. Not even in the same universe. Joe Biden collapsed into himself He did what everybody who's not been insane or uninformed or whatever, what everybody was thinking, this could happen to him. And it happened. He collapsed. He was a senile old man who didn't know what he was saying. Look, the proof is in the reaction, even amongst CNN and MSNBC commentators, that after the debate, they're all talking about whether or not there's going to be a new candidate. Listen, Barack Obama in 2012 had a bad debate night against Mitt Romney. Not a single person in the United States of America was questioning whether Barack Obama should pull out of the race and somebody else should jump in his position. That was never on the table. Nobody could even fathom that would be on the table. And look, it's July. The election's in November. To at this point be talking about switching out the candidate in itself tells you what a disaster this was. So anyway, well, you know what? Let's play a couple of these clips and then maybe we can, because that'll kind of get things going. So here, let's go to this first clip. There's been some more post-debate polling, not too much, but some more. But it all seems to indicate what we thought would be the case. So let's play this first clip here.
Numbers for President Biden post-debate?
We do. CBS News YouGov conducted some polling post-debate. We can compare it to the pre-debate numbers. And the bottom line, Alice, it's not any good. It's not any good. Look at this. Voters who say that Biden has the mental health to be president. It was just 35% pre-debate. Look where it's dropped to now post-debate, 27%. How about that he should be running for president? It was 37% pre-debate. It's now 28%. I have never seen numbers this bad for an incumbent president during my lifetime. I mean, that mental health to be president, just 27%. You might say, okay, that's low, but a lot of people thought Biden was too old back in 2020. These numbers look nothing like this back in 2020. These numbers were bad already. And the truth is, Allison, they have gotten just considerably worse, even in just a few days after that first presidential debate.
There's been some other numbers coming in, too, that indicate the same thing. I think it's all right there for you. I just think that there simply is no recovering from what Joe Biden did in that debate performance. There's the big question going in was, is this guy too old? Is this guy mentally capable of being president? And not just being president, but for 4 more years. And I think he clearly proved that he's not. I don't know any other way to look at this. Any thoughts, Rob?
It's going to be a big problem if the noise machine of CNN or otherwise is saying, hey, this guy's incompetent, because we know how dumb people are. And they might have watched the debate. And if CNN kept telling you, well, Trump was lying the whole time, then some people, Emperor wears new clothes, you're still saying he looks great. And people are like, nah, he's okay. This is still our best chance to beat the evil Trump. And we can't have Trump in there because it's the end of democracy. And this is still our best hope. It seems to me that I feel like I'm watching the best television show on earth, that they decided to take him out. And now we get to watch the 2-week pressure campaign as to who is actually pulling the strings and who they want to replace him with is interesting. But I think somebody saw their opportunity to step in, and they are trying to throw him under the bus and pressure him to step aside. And it's going to be 2 weeks of better and better stories of what this guy looks like behind the scenes until they embarrass him enough that he either steps down, or kind of like pressuring Trump with the court cases, he says, I'm not moving. And then they got to pivot back to it was just a bad night and see if they can resell him. But it seems like a lost cause.
Yeah. I mean, there's, you got to think about it like this, right? It's the fact that the entire discussion since the debate has been about whether or not Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. That is damning in itself, right? The debate performance is damning. That being the conversation after the debate performance is damning. All of these things, and now add one more layer into that. Joe Biden, listen, I'm going on record. I'm saying there's no recovering from that debate. I don't think Joe Biden can win an election. Okay, this is if there's a legitimate election. I just don't think you can do it after that. I think even with the emperor's new clothes, even with how much you can fool people, that is there, don't get me wrong. Look, it was still 27%, right? Or 28%. There's still a percentage of people that no matter what are just going to be, but that percentage when it's that in your face. And look, ultimately, this is why CNN and MSNBC had the reactions they had, right? Because even they recognize we can't pretend that didn't happen. Like, that'll cost us more in terms of credibility than just telling the truth about even in just this little box, telling the truth about what just happened and not the broader truth, which we'll get into in a moment. But it's just too, but okay, so now add this in. Let's say I'm wrong. And okay, this isn't a fatal blow, but it's a damn near fatal blow. So like that debate did happen and the conversation has been about whether or not they could get a nominee in. Now think about the position that Joe Biden's in. He can't have another senior moment for the next 4 months, right? He's got to get all the way through this thing without he cannot have another debate performance like that. I don't think you can let him debate again if you're Joe Biden's campaign. There's talk of a second debate. I don't see how they can let him do that. I mean, with all the pressure on him, and if he stumbles again, then he's totally, but even just now it's going to amplify every senior moment, which Joe Biden has almost every time he leaves the house. You know, like every fall, every slurred speech, every just Joe Biden moment now is going to be just, you know, it's going to be 1,000-fold more damning than it would have been before that debate performance, because now it's just reinforcing over and over again the same narrative.
And what's interesting about that is the hiding will be obvious too. So last time when we said it's very clear that they're keeping him in basement for a reason, it's because we knew that he was an incompetent dumbass. Now, as he needs to actually get out there and prove the fact that it was just a bad night and he is competent, everyone's going to be like, hey, where's this chicken? How come he's not in front of us? How come he's not showing us that he's actually competent? And it's because he can't be. And I think the voters are now going to be aware of that.
Yeah. You know, I think it was Daryl Cooper had a post. It was a really great tweet. And he basically said that if Donald Trump was smart, what Donald Trump would do is say, like in a kind of, if he could be magnanimous, like if he had that in him and he could go, hey, listen, guys, you know, nothing against Joe Biden. It's sad to see. We're all going to go, you know, this way if we live long enough, but for the country, he really should step down. You know, we wish him the best. And it's, you know what I mean? Like kind of in this, you know, not like take shots at him, but actually say like, listen, I should have someone running against me for president. It's the best thing for the country. It's the best. And then he could kind of be the good guy rather than being the bully. And also he could create a political situation where now, if they do switch him out, it's what Trump asked them to do. And if they don't, it's like, hey, I asked to not be running up against this guy. Like there's a lot of smart ways that this could be played. And it seems like, you know, Donald Trump, for better or for worse, only has one speed and does not have this ability to, you know, it's like the thing, like everyone's always hoping, at least on one issue when it really matters, Trump will just not be Donald Trump. But that's not in the cards. I
also think the Democrats have a real RFK Jr. problem because for some Democrats, he's going to be closer to their point of view. And actually, remember that whole return to normalcy thing? There might be big topics such as Israel and otherwise that you and I don't agree with RFK Jr. on, but he's competent. And so if you're a traditional Democrat and you actually start seeing the guy and hearing the guy, all of a sudden that starts to make a little more sense.
Yeah, no, look, 100%. And we can get into that a little bit more, but what ended up happening throughout the Democratic primary, which is really blowing up in their face in a lot of ways now. Let's go. I just sent you one more video, by the way, Rob. Brian, sorry. Let's go to the other one that we had lined up, and then we'll go to the Joy Reid one that I just sent you because I found that pretty interesting also. But let's go to the Chief Nerd one.
For President Biden to be removed from the top of the ticket, he would have to agree to do that.
He has to agree. DNC rules are absolutely clear on this. The threshold to be the nominee is 1,968 delegates. President Biden currently has 3,894. Unless he steps down, there is no mechanism to dislodge him from becoming the renominated candidate for the Democratic Party. Period. End of story. There are lots of people who are talking about it, but unless he removes himself or is somehow otherwise incapacitated, this is a closed matter.
It's a family matter at the moment.
A very important family matter, not just the family, but the broader Democratic Party family.
Okay, so I wanted to go to that clip as you were getting into your RFK point, because this is really, look, here's the whole game here, okay? So essentially what happened is that the Democratic establishment and the corporate media, they find themselves in such an awkward position here. And this is one of the things that's so fascinating about this moment that this week has brought, is that, look, they went all in on this isn't an issue, and we're going to Emperor's New Clothes this. And we're all just going to tell you that, nope, Joe Biden is wearing these beautiful new garments, and that's that. And this is why they decided not to have a primary. And it wasn't only RFK. RFK was the biggest threat, but there was Marianne Williamson. I think even Cenk Uygur was running at one point. I think there was one or two others who were in there. And they decided they're not having primaries. We're going to close this. There will be no primary debates. There will be no primary elections, at least in many states. And so, so now Joe Biden has come in. He's already amassed all the delegates he has to clinch the Democratic nomination. So he's got it clinched. And so now they have to rely on somebody being able to convince or coerce Joe Biden to step down voluntarily. But it's very difficult when you went all in on this not being a problem. You know, it's kind of, we talked about this on the live stream, but it's one of those moments like the lab leak theory, like so many other things where, okay, they want to switch on a dime and, okay, now you're allowed to talk about it, but they're also not going to credit anybody who was talking about this for years, which again, this is not, you know, there are some things, Rob, where maybe we have an insight into something because like we've read a lot of books about it and kind of understand the situation, where like the layman who doesn't read a lot about this is just probably not going to get it as much. But this isn't that. This is easy. This is easy for anyone with a brain to look at Joe Biden and recognize that this is the major problem. And that's why we've been talking about this for years. I mean, like, this isn't even one that I feel like we should take credit for. Like, there's a lot of things I'm like, hey, we got that right. And it's because we, you know, like we have the correct theory or we know our stuff or whatever. This is nothing like that. This is just any human being who is being honest with themselves could have known this. And they went all in on deciding on deciding that we would make it radioactive to talk about this, that we would make you know, gaslight or whatever, you know what I mean? Act like you're crazy if you brought this up. And they went all in to the point of closing the primaries because they knew Joe Biden couldn't stand up to a real primary. But now, maybe if they had sent the signal early on that like, hey, Joe Biden's a weak candidate, we need to get other people in here, they'd at least have some other options to fall back on. So they did this to themselves. And now they're in this position where what do they do? What do they do? Especially when all of them were forced to admit the truth in the immediate wake of the debate. Now they're all going to have to try to pivot back to what? Pretending that he doesn't have a problem with senility? Glenn Greenwald basically essentially predicted that immediately after the debate. That was like, look, they're all throwing Joe Biden under the bus now, but as soon as they find out that Joe Biden is simply not willing to step aside, they're all going to have to walk back into defending Joe Biden. He seems to be right, but I'm just looking at this and I'm going, that is a bridge too far. I don't think there's any way to do that without, even to your NPC audience, them recognizing that like, oh, this is bullshit. And look, again, my argument is just like, that's essentially why they had to tell the truth immediately after the debate. The performance was so bad that even they knew they couldn't get away with this bullshit. So how the hell are they going to move back to that? And it seems like what it's going to be is just, oh, Donald Trump is so awful. Let me try to scare the shit out of you as much as I can. That seems to be the playbook. I don't think there's any chance of that working.
Here's why I don't think that's going to work. Their pitch was a return to normalcy. And if you look at the country now versus when Trump was in for 4 years, and the fact that the Democrats are positioning somebody to be president that clearly has dementia and mental illness, I think there's a lot of people that look at that and go, well, that's not normal either. And I don't like that. And so I bet some of even though I was making the joke that old people like Biden because they like to feel empowered, that they can also stay in their jobs past their prime. My guess is that some of these older people that like Joe Biden will actually go, well, I think Donald Trump is a better chance. And I think some of these educated mom voters that went for Trump that then switched to Biden in the second election, I think they're going to see Trump as just being a slightly better. I think inflation and the border wall is a real problem. I don't know if people are educated enough to quite understand why the wars are such an issue. But I think there's a lot of people that just want to see a pathway towards improving the country and addressing these issues. And when you got a guy with dementia and they're trying to pretend like he's okay, I think when people are actually pulling the lever, you're going to have a lot of people that no longer buy into this. Oh, Trump's going to ruin the country. He's incredibly evil. He was there for 4 years. The country still stands. And now you got a choice between dementia or Trump. I think a lot of people are going Trump.
Yeah, I find that hard to argue with, And look, it's a loss for the country. First off, it's a total embarrassment. Don't get me wrong.
Their pitches, by the way, their pitches was, how would we look to the rest of the world? It was one of the soft goods of the Democrats was that we look presentable, that the president needs to look presentable. And you're telling me that Donald Trump, with all of this chaos, is less presentable than Joe Biden right now? Of course not.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is ZBiotics. If you've ever skipped a workout the morning after, some drinks the night before, well, you got to check out ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. So here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Give ZBiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/POTP to get 15% off your first order when you use POTP at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head over to zbiotics.com/POTP and use code POTP at checkout for 15% off. Thanks to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back into the show. The silver lining in all of this is that between Donald Trump's 4 years and Joe Biden's 4 years, you could not have put together a better tag team to expose how full of shit the entire system is, both in their own ways. Donald Trump did it by kind of provoking a reaction out of the corporate media and the political class that kind of overextended themselves and exposed the holes in them. And then Joe Biden did it just by being a walking vegetable and demonstrating that the entire system will attempt to protect you as best as possible, that they will totally lie to their own, audience, in order to protect their interests. So that's kind of the silver lining. But look, I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that it's totally humiliating for the United States of America for this guy to be the leader. This was one of the things, by the way, that was a major takeaway people had, and a very, I think, organic and real takeaway people had when Tucker Carlson interviewed Vladimir Putin. That, one of the things that was like, as an American, people were struck by. And this is a condemnation, by the way, of Trump and Biden, not just Biden. But one of the things people were struck by was just like the command that Putin had of history and politics and argumentation in general. And that's not to say that you agree with him. As I first of all, I didn't agree with his opening half hour about, that like how Russia kind of has some historical claim over Ukraine. I don't know, that argument is totally not convincing to me, but he's got an argument and he knows the history and he can present it to you. And just that alone is like, you could tell from listening to Vladimir Putin that he's read a lot of books on this subject. And he's got thoughts about them, and he's got a command of the information. And it is totally humiliating that a country like the United States of America doesn't have a leader like that. And that is not the highest bar. You know what I mean? Like if you were talking about like a really good high school teacher, not even a college professor, but like a really good, let's say like an 11th grade English teacher or something, or history teacher or something like that. I was like saying to you, I'm interviewing people for this job, but I haven't found anyone who's demonstrated that they've read several books on this topic and have a command of the information. You'd be like, well, then keep interviewing people. What? That's the bare minimum. Like that's a prerequisite. That's not something to even brag about. That's just like, how would you be doing this if you haven't done that? Same thing for like a podcast host, a show like this, like what, I don't know, like you, Rob, very clearly have like read several books on the topics that you're interested in, and you have a command of the information and you have your opinions. Okay, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but like that's the most basic thing. So the fact that Joe Biden is our guy is that, like, on that level, it's totally humiliating. But in addition to that, there's a real loss for the country that Donald Trump isn't being pushed on anything. Like Donald Trump got a W in that debate performance. Not only did he get the win, he got perhaps the most dominant win in the history of televised presidential debates. Not even perhaps, it was the most dominant. I mean, obviously Joe Biden had the worst performance, and therefore Donald Trump's whatever, what, if you see even the things like people are giving Trump credit for, they're like, it's like, oh, he didn't humiliate himself while this other guy was humiliating himself. That's essentially it. Oh, Trump was composed, whatever that means. When they cut his mic off, he didn't keep screaming even though he knew his microphone was off. That's the credit. But it's not as if, look, Donald Trump was able to get away with everything in that debate because he didn't even have an opponent. So Donald Trump can basically just pretend that 2020 didn't happen. He could just go, hey, we had a great economy for 3 years. And then Joe Biden came in. You're like, well, but what? Aren't presidential terms typically 4 years? What happened in that fourth year of 2020? There's no referendum on 2020 because who the hell cares? Joe Biden doesn't remember the year, and he was just awful in 2021 and 2022. So, okay, it's a wash. And then even on, on the issues of, say, like Ukraine and Gaza, Trump's answers were terrible. They're terrible. There was no more America First talk. There was no talk of the military industrial complex or how these weapons companies are just making a killing, that basically we ended the war in Afghanistan and they wanted their profits. So we found 2 more proxy wars that we can fight. No talk of anything like that. He basically said, oh, we should make Europe pay more for Ukraine, and Israel should kill Gazans faster. They're taking too long. And oh, by the way, Joe Biden's a Palestinian. Ooh, that was his big knock on Joe Biden. This lifelong Zionist who is currently funding and arming the assault of Gaza. The real issue there is that he's a Palestinian. Like it was, and you could already immediately see where if there was anyone even just mildly competent, Donald Trump would actually have to answer. He'd actually have to take positions on these. They'd actually push him to run on something and make some promises. And so, of course, because Joe Biden is such a vegetable, you don't even get that. So there is, there's a silver lining to it. It does expose the whole system in a way. It is entertaining as shit. It gives people like me and you a lot to talk about. But there's a real profound tragedy to all of this that I hope isn't lost on people. This is not healthy.
hopefully it wakes them up that on the Democratic side, it's clear that these people don't have your interests at heart. Joe Biden is clearly interested in his own power grab. The idea that he thinks he's the most qualified in his current state to run the country. Clearly, the guy wants to remain in power because it's the ring and he likes having it. And Kamala Harris knows how unpopular she is, and she must know that she's not the smartest, slickest, or most competent. But hey, I've got a chance at power here. And has there ever been, a more clear display that it's about the people wanting power and not about them having any interest in trying to help you?
Well, there's one other interesting wrinkle in all of this, which I have a feeling we're going to find more. We're going to figure out more about this over the next week. I hope I hope by the time this podcast comes out, it's not already irrelevant because something might there might be a major move here. But this was within the 24 hours after the debate. It was reported by NBC News. So again, take this with a grain of salt. But it was reported by NBC News that Kamala Harris, it's one of those like people close to Kamala Harris speaking, anonymously said, but that she was furious that there was all this discussion about replacing Joe Biden and that she was being overlooked. So
she's more delusional than Joe.
Well, look here, but there's a signal there. Now, again, you got to take this type of reporting with a grain of salt. You never actually know. Although in this case, in this instance, the only reason why I give it some weight is because there'd be no reason for them to make this up. In fact, it would only be advantageous for them for this not to be the case. But if that is the case, then we've got two signals that are coming out, which is number one, Joe Biden's not going down voluntarily. In other words, he's going to have to be pressured. And number two, Kamala Harris is not going down voluntarily. She's also going to have to be pressured. Now, Kamala Harris, as we've discussed, again, everyone who's not been in this ridiculous world, like I don't even know what to say. It's not even like any of the other. This isn't like believing in lockdowns or believing in the war or believing in central banks or something where it's like it's wrong and it's destructive and you have bad arguments. This is just like ignoring reality. I'm saying the world of people who have been pretending that there's not a major problem with Joe Biden cognitively. To everybody else, this is the dynamic we've been talking about for a while here, that Kamala Harris, she's holding Democratic kryptonite in her woman of color hands, right? Which is that she can play that card and play it to death. And they are totally screwed if she plays this. Because look, what is it? What is it that they want to do? They want to leapfrog over the person who is rightfully next in line. And the person so they brought in Kamala Harris and made her the vice presidential candidate so that they could add a historic element to the Joe Biden campaign, because progressives love this by their very nature, by their very DNA. This is what moves them. We're progressing. We're making progress. And if you're always making progress, then you're always going to have these firsts. These historic moments. This is what Barack Obama had, the first black president. You see the way that moved progressives, right? What Hillary Clinton had, this is going to be the first female president. Okay, well, Joe Biden, being a rich old white guy who's been a freaking senator for 170 years, there's nothing historic about him becoming president, but you attach Kamala Harris to it, and now it's the first ever female of color vice president. Okay, so now you get this kind of feeling for progressives to feel good about progress. So they used her to put her there. But the thing about putting her there is that puts her next in line. That's the whole thing. That's what the vice presidency is. It's really nothing else except you're next in line. If the president dies, you're the president. If the president doesn't choose to run, you get to run. If the president runs and loses, you're the immediate presumptive nominee for the next time around. That's what the position is. And so now, when you got to bail on this guy, we're saying, oh, we're going to leapfrog over her and get Gavin Newsom in or something. But all she has to do is step up there and just say, you know, we have a long history of brushing aside women of color in this country. And there are some people out there who'd want to do that again. But I know the Democratic establishment is better than that. They would never do that. And she can box them in. And so she's already signaled, if this reporting is correct, that that's what she intends to do. And why wouldn't she? Why wouldn't she want that power? The rest of them all want power. What do you think? She's there because she don't like power? You think this woman rose from being Montel Williams' side piece to vice president of the United States of America because she doesn't like power? You know? So she's going to fight for this as well. And if that's the dynamic and they can't get Kamala Harris out, then the real question here for the powers that be is, has Joe Biden fallen far enough that you're better off with Kamala Harris? And Kamala Harris is so bad that even after Joe Biden pissed his pants on national television the other day, there's a whole lot of people going, we'll still roll with Joe Biden before we give this Kamala Harris lady a shot. It's just an incredible situation. It's like surreal. You can't even believe it. And at the same time, it's, again, I came to terms a long time ago with how evil the ruling class in the United States of America is. It's actually a harder thing to wrap your head around that they're this incompetent. Because you didn't think that, like, you didn't see that you were doing this to yourself. You weren't, at least a year ago, prepping out, gaming out the scenarios here where you got someone else in. It's shocking. And they do, obviously they have a short bench, but anybody else has got to be better than these two. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Moink. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef, lamb, pasteurized pork, chicken, sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon, all straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should, because the family farm does it better. You choose the meats delivered in every box. You can choose from ribeyes, chicken breasts, pork chops, salmon fillets, and much more. Plus, you can cancel anytime. I got to tell you guys, I've been using Moink for a while now. I love it. I do not trust the meat in my supermarket. I don't even trust my local butchers. I want to get my stuff directly from a family farm, and I'm telling you, it is the most delicious meat you'll ever taste. Keep American farmers going by signing up at moinkbox.com/POTP right now, and listeners of this show will get 2 free steaks in your first box. It's the best steak you'll ever taste, but for a limited time only, go on over. Come on, 2 free steaks I'm going to get you right now. That's moinkbox.com/POTP. That's moinkbox.com/POTP. Moinkbox.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show. Anyway, okay, so I wanted to go, I just sent you the Joy Reid video, Brian. I wanted to play this because I think this might give a little bit of insight into how the pivot back to supporting Joe Biden is going to go. Of course, Joy Reid is a host over at MSNBC and one of their biggest propagandists. And so this was her video, a TikTok or something like that she made just the other day. Let's play this.
This election is no longer about the old guy that's in the White House now. Like, you know, all the op-ed pages and the New York Times can run around and opine about, you know, what Joe Biden should do. And, you know, y'all have fun with that. Enjoy yourselves, intellectual thought leaders. I no longer care. Doesn't matter to me anymore. It's above me now. It's above me now. There's a Waffle House next door. There's a Best Western next door as well. It's above me now. It's above Joe Biden now. Don't care about Joe Biden's age, infirmity, that he shuffle when he walk. I don't care. He could be seated for the rest of, from now to election day, and never get up off a chair. He could sit down. He could roll around in a wheelchair. He could be on a skateboard, seated. I don't care. Donald John Trump cannot be allowed back into the White House. Because if you combine that madman with this court, 2 of whose members are insurrectionists one of whom flew an upside down flag at his home, and blamed it on his wife, who's also crazy. The other of whom's wife literally was part of the insurrection. And they ruled in this. They put themselves in the Leonard Leo 6. They went ahead and ruled on this with no shame. You combine this court, two of whose members are going to immediately resign, and put 30-year-olds in there, including probably the guy who wrote the opinion in the beaters case, meaning that beaters should be able to get machine guns, which, by the way, they have now arrogated to themselves the power to decide all federal rules. Everything, whether your plane that you fly in is safe, how much carbon can be in the atmosphere, how much filth can be in your water. They said agencies that have experts can't decide that. They will decide that. So they are kings, and Trump is king. You put him in the White House, combined with this court and a Republican House and Senate, we're done, y'all. All the rights that were won in the 20th century, the hard-earned rights of women, laborers, workers, the rights of children. Remember, child labor used to be legal. The rights of black folks, forget that. The rights of non-white immigrants, forget that. All of the 20th century, they are trying to repeal the entire 20th century, and they're doing it fast. Between them and these crazy Republican governors, they are repealing the American century, the 20th century, because they don't like it and they want back the 19th century. The century when super rich white men, unchecked and untaxed, amassed great wealth, passed it down with no taxation to their descendants, and pretended that they had earned
Okay,
it
we
on
can
their own,
play
and they
it.
were-
Pause it here.
Before we break it down, when did Cisco get into politics?
If you're around my age, that's a great reference. So look, forget, I don't know. I'm tempted to start breaking down her nonsense on how, these rich white men got money when it was untaxed. I'm like, yeah, you're right. No one gets rich today. That's why we got no more billionaires in this country ever since the income tax. Okay, all of that aside, you see the propaganda here, like how she's starting to turn these wheels, and it's really, I mean, just first off, appreciate how, look, I guess this is the best they can do. It's funny that, you know, the idea that they even still have the ability to go, no, I know, but things just reached DEFCON. Yeah, listen, yesterday, sure, we could have had a conversation about Joe Biden being senile, but now, with this Supreme Court judgment on presidential immunity, now I don't even care. I don't even care how old Joe Biden is. That doesn't even matter to me. Of course, the question was never, does it matter to Joy Reid that the president is senile? You know, like, the more relevant question is, like, does this matter to voters? Which it's going to. But you just see the unbelievable dishonesty in Joy Reid, as if before this ruling, she would have cared about Joe Biden being senile, right? So it's like, imagine pivoting from, oh, you're crazy if you think Joe Biden is senile. Oh no, the emperor is wearing these beautiful clothes. What are you talking about? To going, you know, I don't even care if he's got clothes. Like, that's never been what this was about. Whether he's got clothes or doesn't have clothes, whatever. I'm not even going to get into that argument with you because, oh my God, Donald Trump just made himself king, and the Supreme Court is king, and also the House and the Senate. You can't let all these kings in there. They're going to strip everybody's rights. Black people don't have rights anymore. Women don't have rights anymore. It's like, look, this is going, if they cannot get Joe Biden out, this is going to be what all of them are going to have to pivot back to. And it's just, I just don't see any way this can work. You can't go to they've been at 11 since 2016. What are they going to say now? Oh, because of this latest round of Supreme Court rulings, we're at 11? We were already at 11. You started by telling me democracy was on the ballot. What the hell are you talking about? You can take this to another level. Now it doesn't matter that Joe Biden shits his pants on national television because the Supreme Court ruled on presidential immunity. This is just too goofy. I don't know, Rob. Any thoughts?
We're at DEFCON, even worse.
Yeah, like what? I mean, come on. What is this?
Wild week of Supreme Court cases, though.
All right, well, let's we don't have that much time, and I got to get back to my family vacation here, so we can talk about the Supreme Court cases more on the next podcast. But if you want to just quickly. You want to just talk about the presidential immunity one first?
Well, we can work backwards. You got broad strokes presidential immunity for anything that's even on the outer reaches of official functions. In my personal opinion, I don't know why we need a president who can engage in illegal activity and why they can't create some sort of a secondary Supreme Court to give quick rulings on whether or not something is or isn't illegal. But they prefer a framework by which presidents can be aggressive and they are above prosecutions so that they can make wartime or other seemingly what they're claiming to be important decisions. I don't understand why we need a framework for presidents to be allowed to do illegal actions. With that said, even if you were to say the presidents could be prosecuted, I don't think what Trump did with January 6th deserves to be prosecuted. And with this ruling, the Jack Smith case is almost certainly falling apart.
Yeah, it does. It does seem that. And in fact, there was just some reporting out today that they're thinking about postponing the verdict. And there's even some whispers of charges being dropped and stuff like that. So it does seem like it's going to have an effect. I will say this. I don't know if I could think of a Supreme Court ruling before where I was opposed to it in principle, yet in terms of practical application, really kind of got why it's probably a good thing. So just to be clear about this, so this is one of the things that has always, anybody who's a libertarian is probably experienced this before. One of the kind of like objections to freedom that people will throw out a lot is that they'll kind of come up with scenarios where violating somebody's rights, violating the non-aggression principle could be necessary. Like in theory. And one of the reasons why I've never found this to be a compelling argument is because I would always think to myself, like, okay, but just let the starting point be that this is illegal. And if there are some crazy extenuating circumstances, then go explain that to a judge. You know, so like even if like when people would be defending torture being legal, and people like Sam Harris would think that they had these brilliant arguments for why torture should be legal, which, by the way, came down to the exact same arguments that he made for why he was actually right about vaccine mandates. And it would be like, well, change the variables. And if the variables were different, then you would support them too, or whatever. But like, so theoretically, let's say I'm arguing torture should be illegal. Somebody else is arguing torture should be legal. And their argument is, well, imagine these crazy extenuating circumstances where there's a terrorist and there's a bomb that's about to go off. And the only way you can get the information out of the guy is to torture him. Okay? But you could save 100,000 lives by torturing this one guy. It's like, okay, so in my framework, torture is illegal. But you find yourself in this situation where you can save 100,000 lives by torturing a guy. Okay. So do it. But then the onus is going to be on you to have to demonstrate in court that, like, listen, I know I broke the law, but this is a crazy situation. And in fact, there are situations like that where people violate the law, but the situation was so crazy that when they explain it in court, a jury of your peers is going to be like, all right, you know, this guy didn't just break into somebody's house. He was literally dying of thirst in the desert and came across a house and broke in to get water. He's willing to reimburse the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're probably not going to like lock that guy up for breaking and entering. In a similar way, I don't see why that can't apply to presidents as well. And to be clear, obviously, the Supreme Court ruling said, you know, within, like, it has to be a presidential duty. It can't, like, the president can't just run down the street and stab a guy. He doesn't have immunity for that. However, in theory, I totally disagree with this. I mean, I totally think that, like, for example, Barack Obama, who drone bomb killed American citizens, plural, without charges, he may have done that as a presidential act, but I don't believe he should be above the law for that. I think he should be able to be prosecuted for that. It's a goddamn crime. It's a moral crime. Whether you murder somebody or a president murders somebody, I don't think you should get to do that and have immunity. So in theory, I don't agree with it. However, you also have to acknowledge that in reality, we already have that. In reality, Barack Obama's not getting prosecuted for that. That's not on the table. It's not happening, at least not anytime soon, right? And so we've kind of existed in this world now, and this has been demonstrated with Donald Trump, where presidents are above the law. They do not. It doesn't matter if George W. Bush institutes torture, lies us into war, if Obama kills American citizens, starts wars without a congressional declaration, all of these things. They all do it, and they've all gotten away with that. The only one who's getting prosecuted is the guy who's seen as outside of the system, who's having the justice system weaponized against him. And so I don't know if I'm making it clear, but so there is just like this big contrast or conflict, which I guess I got to work out in my own head some more, between, in theory, what I believe here versus the clear practical application of this is that all this is going to do is take off the table weaponizing the judicial system against a political dissident. In other words, we're not getting the day, like it's not anybody who was in bed with the military industrial complex and commits war crimes is not going to be prosecuted. Yet an anti-war guy running for president almost certainly would be. By the way, I'm not even claiming Donald Trump's an anti-war guy. I'm just saying, like, if a young Ron Paul was running and looked like he was going to win, yeah, they're going to weaponize the judicial system against him. So, like, by taking that off the table, at least to an extent, it, in effect, is actually kind of leveling the playing field where, like, not only the war criminals have immunity, whereas in the past it's been exclusively the war criminals who get it. Does that make sense?
I completely understand your argument, and I get where you're coming from. I think there's better solutions to fixing that particular issue, and I personally don't think that I don't think that what you're essentially saying is that you can weaponize prosecutors to go after good people that are outside of the system, and so we need to correct for that because, I mean, I'm just repeating what you said. So I totally understand your argument. And I think there's validity there. I think that, no one would ever put this into action, but to me, the solve is you get a secondary court, and the same way as like people get warrants, you get a quick judgment on whether or not what you're doing is legal or illegal, so that there's no, hey, we're not able to make quick decisions here. You take that off the table. Hey, is it legal to go bomb these people? Yes or no? Like, what specifically is the action that a president needs to be able to do quickly that they need to do things that are illegal? Like, what is this situation?
And why? Well, look, and back to my point that I was making before about how I've never found this critique of libertarianism to be impressive. You know, like, oh, maybe the first time I ever heard it, I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. And then as soon as you wrap your head around it, you're like, no, that's just not it. Because, like, look, in the same sense that, okay, let's say, like, if you take like some crazy, like the movie Saw. Okay, you remember all those crazy horror movies? Fun movies, by the way. But let's say, you know, it's something like that where, some evil maniac has like hidden a key to a lock inside of my, chest, and in order for you to unlock your entire family and save them, you have to rip me open and kill me in order to do it, right? And like, you do that. You kill me in order to save your whole family because you find yourself in this crazy situation. And you're like, okay. But the answer to that isn't like, you make murder legal. It's like, yeah, okay, in that situation, we're still going to err on the side of you just, you get charged with a crime and you have to go explain that in a court, rather than erring on the side of murder's legal now. You know what I mean? Because there's just way more problems associated with that. And so, in the same sense, you could say, hey, if the president finds himself in a situation where he has to break the law and he thinks in the moment that's the most important thing, and, okay, so do it. And then you got to go explain that in court, rather than erring on the side that the president can do whatever he wants to in his official business. Even if it's breaking laws, it doesn't matter. He's just allowed to do that. I see there's a way bigger problem with erring on the side of murder should be legal than erring on the side of murder should be illegal. And in this Saw experiment that we're talking about, you go explain that to the court and you have to throw yourself on a jury of your peers. That's kind of why we have judges and juries and things like that. So you can take these crazy situations into account. Seems like a better system to me.
All right. And then I guess next episode, we got to get into a bit of the Chevron case and then also the tax censorship case. Because in my eye, the Supreme Court's 1 for 3.
1 for 3 being Chevron being the win.
Yeah, Chevron's a win. And then the presidential immunity and the Biden administration getting off the hook for text censorship, I think we're both bad.
Yeah. So I think no question we've talked a little bit about the presidential immunity, but I think to foreshadow our next episode, no question, I think me and you are both going to agree that the Chevron case was excellent and the text censorship case was very bad. So we'll get into to all of that stuff on the next episode. Thanks, guys, for listening. Hope you're enjoying this crazy time.
SummerPorchTour.com and Run Your Mouth podcast. Check it out.
SummerPorchTour.com.
Porchtour.com. I'm a dumb person. Porchtour.com.
Yes, see, somebody corrected me. Someone tweeted. They were like, "Oh, Dave, you don't respect Rob. You can't even get his website right," because I guess I said it wrong. But it's like, no, I'm almost certain you've said 17 different websites.
I think I own all of them, and they all go to the same spot. But Porchtour.com. Keep it simple.
Porchtour.com and of course comicdavesmith.com for all of me and Rob's gigs together, and go check out Run Your Mouth, of course, Rob's fantastic podcast. Go check that out. All right, catch you guys next time. Peace.